Join me today as we talk about the Cold War computer run amok movie, Wargames. This is the Geek Cabal channel. My name is Bobbie, and today we're going to be talking about the movie Wargames from the early 80s. And this movie, in case you don't know, features a computer that kind of runs amok and very nearly causes World War III. So, who's in this movie? Our main character is Matthew Broderick. He plays David, and Matthew Broderick, just in case you don't know who that is, the main character is Ferris Bueller in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If Chad were here, he would want me to remind you that he's in the I think Chad, maybe it's Jimmy. I don't remember which one of them is obsessed with this. Maybe both of them. He's in the American Godzilla movie, the first one from like the late 90s, early 2000s, the not good one. And also the live-action Inspector Gadget, and numerous other movies. Also, the movie Lady Hawk. Going to be kind of relevant here in a moment. So then we also have Ali Sheedy as Jennifer, a classmate. I wouldn't go so far as to say love interest, but she's a classmate. You know, they've got a thing at the beginning of the movie where she kind of gets him in trouble and, apologizes, and he's like, oh, hey, by the way, I can use the computer to change your grade. And yeah, she's in a number of other movies from the 80s, notably The Breakfast Club. And then she also, as numerous other people who were stars from movies in the 80s and 90s ended up doing, she's on the show Psych. Now, she was a continuing character. She wasn't in a lot of episodes, but she was in a number of them. There was an ongoing plot line involving a pair of serial killers, Yin and Yang. I believe she was Yang, and Peter Weller was Yin, in case you know. So, yeah, so she's in that as a total psychopath. Does a pretty good job. Then we have John Wood as Professor Falcon. He's the guy who creates the computer. Now, the only other thing I've ever seen John Wood in that I can recall, he's the bishop in the movie Lady Hawk, a movie which we'll be getting to at some point. Then we have Dabney Coleman, who plays McKittrick. He is the guy who used to work with Falcon and is using the Whopper computer system to take over the silos instead of having men in the silos, to have it so it's all computerized. So they push a button and the missiles fire. And let's see, Dabney Coleman, he's been in a lot of things. He was in the Dragnet movie as a Hugh Hefner type. Then he's the boss in 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton, and I don't remember who else is in that movie, like the other women that are in it, but it is kind of entertaining. And I don't know if she made the song for the movie or if the movie came afterward and it was just coincidental. I'd have to look that up. Like a lot of people, he's also a guest star in an episode of Columbo. But yeah, he's been in a lot of things. He's even in the Law and Order TV movie. I don't know if many of you know this, but there is a TV movie for Law and Order, and it explains how it's mainly made to explain what happened to Chris Noth's character after he departs the main show, but then eventually finds his way back for the show Criminal Intent. It's a bit of Law and Order inside information there for you folks. I didn't know about it until I saw it on TV one day. It's not bad, though. He plays the chief, lieutenant, whatever his rank is on Staten Island. Yeah. Then we have Barry Corbin as General Behringer. He's been in numerous other things. Also a guest star on Columbo. If I had to guess, he's probably a guest star somewhere in Psych, but I don't know for sure. And probably one of the more recent things, and I say more recent, I think the movie came out 10 years ago at this point, maybe more. He is in No Country for Old Men. He's the guy that Tommy Lee Jones goes to see at the very end of the movie, wheelchair bound, and basically tells him, no point in doing, no point in chasing after things that are lost, because while you're chasing it, more's going out the door, and kind of adds to the weird depression ending that movie has. But no, he's in numerous other things though. Then we have Michael Ensign, who plays, just listed as Behringer's aide in the credits. I don't even know if he had a name in the movie. And I only mention him because he's in several other things too, but he's in Ghostbusters. He is the, I think he's the maitre, was he the maitre d'? He's the one who's running the hotel that calls the Ghostbusters, where Slimer is towards the beginning of the movie. Who initially balks at paying the price they want him to pay, and they're just like, well, we'll just put the ghost back in here. He's like, all right, fine, I'll pay it, whatever. Not a big part, but memorable. Then we have James Tolkien, who plays some kind of federal agent. And again, he's a bit part. I mainly mention him because he's also the principal in Back to the Future. And consequently, also the sheriff in Back to the Future 3 or Marshall, I don't remember which one. And is also a police officer in the real world segments of Masters of the Universe. Probably wishes he could take that back. He's also in Top Gun. Yeah. And probably lots of other things too. And then we also have Michael Madsen at the very beginning of the movie. This had to be really early in his career, where he plays one of the men in the missile silo, and they get a launch order and they don't launch the missiles because the other guy wants to get some kind of confirmation on the phone, because as he puts it, I want to know these are real orders before I kill 20 million people. So because as far as the launch silos, where you see there at the beginning of the movie, there's two guys in there, and they've got to both arm all the missiles, turn the keys, and all that stuff. And the keys are separated by enough distance so that you have to have two people. It's part of the system to make sure one lone person can't just go psychotic. Well, the thing is, like, that hub controls multiple missiles. So, yeah, like, depending on what their target is, they could be responsible for the death of 20 million people. So, and since we didn't go to war with the Soviets, it was a bad order. So ultimately, him failing to do his job was the correct thing, but it's used as impetus for McKittrick to push to take men out of the silos completely, so that everything can be done at NORAD. And once it's all locked in, they push a button and all the missiles fire, or however many they need to. So that's the backdrop. It's the early 80s. It's the Cold War. The US, the Soviets, nukes, all this fun stuff. And so, as the movie progresses, our primary character is David. And he's in high school. He's pretty good with computers. He intentionally gets in trouble so he can get the password to the computer system to call up the school's computer and change his grades. And because he knows where they keep the password. And so that's how he runs into Ali Sheedy's character, and because she gets him in trouble and gets him sent to the office. But again, it's on purpose. So then he is looking at this book, magazine, where they're talking about this company called Protovision. They got some games he wants to try out. And, well, if you can find their computer system, you can probably get in. Because this being the early 80s, and I found this out from a short here on YouTube, that apparently this movie actually prompted a lot of systems to need passwords after this, to not just have default access. They actually had to put in passwords, because it was assumed that the only systems that would be connecting to them would be systems that are supposed to connect to them. This was aside from like certain sensitive things like banks and things like that. So this movie did actually prompt a change in the computer industry, if I'm to believe that short. So he figures out where they are in California, gets the area code, and just sets his phone to start dialing, because for those of you who don't remember the dial-up days, for your modem, it had to dial up a thing and it makes this screeching noise, and then it connects because it's all done with audio tones. Well, the thing at the other end has to recognize that. So if you call a number and it's not one of these numbers, it does nothing. It's like sending a fax. Okay, if you set it to send a fax and it's just someone just picks up at the other end, it doesn't send the fax. There's nowhere to send it. It doesn't. The audio tone doesn't say, "Hey, send me." So he's just set the phone just to calling every single number, and finally he connects to another computer, and he sees a list of games, but they're not the games that Pro Division has, so it's another company entirely, he thinks. And he can't get in because it's a secure system. And so he goes to talk to a couple guys he knows that are programmers, and one of them explains that whenever he designs a program, he builds in a back door, a secret password that the people who bought the program from don't know he installed, so later on he can go in and see what they've done with things, see how they're using it and things like that, or if he just wants to retain access to it. And his assistant's like, "Oh, you can't be telling him that, you can't be telling him about our back doors." And he's getting on his case, and he's like, "Hey, listen, like, back doors aren't a secret, like, I'm not telling him anything he probably doesn't already know." And so he's like, "So if you were to put a back door into one of these systems, like, how would you get in?" He's like, "Well, you're gonna need to know the password." And this is where his assistant is like, "You guys are so stupid. Like, the answer's right there in the first game." He's like, "Look at the name of the game. It's Falcon's Maze. Like, look up Falcon." And so Matthew Broderick begins to do some research, finds out there's a Professor Falcon, computer science guy, worked for the DoD. But he's dead now, and he had a son named Joshua. And so, like, Ali Sheedy comes over and she sees he's doing all this research, which, by the way, this is actually one of the authentic parts of the movie. When it comes to hacking, the weakest link in the entire security chain is the human element, because people are lazy and unimaginative. They make passwords and usernames based on, like, the usernames usually have to follow some kind of pattern the company puts out, and then the password is something related to them, like a pet name, a street name, where they grew up, that's something like that. So the more you can find out about the person, the greater likelihood you're going to figure out what their password is, unless they actually follow, like, some of the procedures and do the things you're actually supposed to do, which most people don't. And there's a book by one of the more successful computer hackers out there, and that's what he said, is like, it's really about trying to figure out the mindset of the person that made the password. And there's like a whole strategy he used. He would, like, pretend to be someone that should have access to certain things in the company to gather intel, and he'd repeatedly do this till he finally had enough way to bullshit his way through farther and farther into the company to finally actually gain access. And so that's why companies go to great lengths to keep these things secret, and half the time it's for naught because people can figure them out. So that part's fairly accurate to what you would actually need to do to actually gain access to sensitive systems. Don't do that, by the way; it's illegal. So so he's sitting there watching a video with Professor Falcon and his son, and realizes that the thing that mattered most to him in the world was his son, Joshua. So he tries that as the password, and bingo, that was it. And so he gains access, and the computer thinks it's Professor Falcon because it's his login name. And so he asks, "Hey, you want to hear what this thing actually sounds like?" So he turns it on, and it's like, "Greetings, Professor Falcon," and it's a technological voice, digitalized, however you want to hear it. Probably not digitalized at that point, but you know what I mean. Synthetic, that's the word I'm going for. And so they had done some other things, like one of the numbers that his thing had called was a bank, and he's like, "I better remember that, I might need that later." And he showed her that he could get into, like, an airline thing and make reservations for tickets for two, and so he makes reservations for them to go to Paris. And but then he gets into this system, and they see the list of games, and the one jumps out is Global Thermonuclear War. So they decide to play. He takes on the role of the Russians. They pick targets in the United States. And so then they set everything, and it like starts giving them like damage projections and casualty projections and everything else. And what has actually happened is he didn't call a game company. It was a number that rerouted into the Whopper, the computer system that they now have tied into the ICBMs, the one that's supposed to tell them, hey, the Russians are doing this, you should do that. And so the computer starts running the simulation. So they're at NORAD, they see simulated launches, like they think the Russians are going for it. And then it stops. And so they don't know what happened. They realize that there's a game simulation running. And so they David cuts the connection because he hangs up and doesn't realize that that the computer's still going, like it's trying to win. And eventually the feds come and arrest him because they figure out where his phone was, and they bring him there to NORAD to explain himself. And throughout the movie there are, well, I'll get to that towards the end, never mind. Sorry. So they bring him there because they're convinced that he's probably working for the Russians, and because he fits the profile. So they bring him there, and he talks to McKittrick, Dabney Coleman's character, and Dabney Coleman is convinced that he's just feeding him a line of bullshit, because it's like, really, a game? Like, come on, you say you broke into our computer trying to find a game. And as I was rewatching this the other night, I realized that there were definitely things he could have told them, that they could verify, that would probably have helped his case. He could have said something like, hey, I saw this ad in this magazine, it's this issue, go get it off the newsstand, it's for Protovision, which you see here, which is located in this section of California, which is why I called all these phone numbers. Now they might still write it off as, oh, that's just a cover for your commie bullshit or something, but there are things he could have said to help his case. And then he explains that Joshua contacted him the second time, and they're like, well, computers don't call people, and he's like, well, yours did. Well, I mean, that's something that's easily verifiable. You can see who initiated the phone call. It's to one person from another person. It's not just, oh, the line's in use. No, the phone company can tell you where the call originated. And when it's not his house, problem solved. So that's to me a little bit of a weak point in the movie. There's a couple others. I mean, they're all okay, fine. They're not huge logical leaps or anything. So he logs into McKittrick's computer while he's out of the office, and McKittrick, he's like, I think he's working on someone else, because the thing acts up while he's there. And so finally he's talking to the computer, and he's trying to explain to it this isn't a game, this is real life. And this is where we find out the fatal flaw in the design of the computer, where the computer finally asks him, what's the difference? And he realizes that he can't explain it, that the computer doesn't understand it, and so it's going to try to win the game, and win the game is going to involve going to war with the Soviets. So yeah, that's when he realizes what the real problem is, tries to explain it to McKittrick. He doesn't want to hear it, so they're going to arrest him. He's able to escape using some crafty techno wizardry, and not really wizardry, I think it all would have worked. Then he escapes by getting in with a group of tourists, because they just give tours of NORAD. Pretty sure they don't actually give tours of NORAD. That is one of the faults of the movie that I found out much later. The same YouTube short I mentioned earlier mentioned that the federal government would not let them in to see the actual NORAD, which tells me they don't give you tours of NORAD. So they just had to design it how they pictured it would work. And the people that actually run NORAD are like, yeah, that's like our that's like the dream setup. Like ours is nothing like that. That's way too advanced. So yeah. Um, so he escapes, calls up Ali Sheedy's character because he also realizes that Professor Falcon's still alive. Because the computer, Joshua's like, I tried to contact you at your classified residence. And he's like, what classified residence? And it tells him, he's like, So he realizes that Falcon's still alive because the computer's able to get the residence from a pension file. That's where they're sending his pension payments, which you don't do if someone's dead. So he goes there. He asks Ali Sheedy to send him money to get a plane ticket. And then she shows up at the airport. And so then they both go. And they get there. And Professor Falcon is basically like, well, yeah, whatever. Is like, they're like, dude, the world's going to end in nuclear fire and you can stop it. He's like, yeah, but I don't really want to. I mean, that takes some effort. I mean, we had a good run as a species. Maybe it'll be the bees next time. And he's basically explaining that, like, you know, the dinosaurs used to exist. Then they didn't. It's like, it'll be the same thing with us. And they're like, yeah, that was a freak occurrence of nature. Like, this is something we could actually stop. And he's like, yeah, but why? And finally they're like, look, we understand that you don't care. You're already dead. Like, but if your son were still alive, you would care. And so, you know, that's when he realizes that they're right. And so they leave instead of just staying there. They're on an island, so they got to take a ferry there to miss the last ferry. They're like, well, we'll find a boat, get back to the mainland, and try to warn them somehow. So a helicopter shows up. They initially think that he just sold them out, but he's on board the helicopter. He's like, all right, let's go. So, as they are en route to NORAD, the computer tells them that the Soviets have gone to total commitment and have launched thousands of warheads. And so Behringer gets the president on the line, and there's a whole sequence where they're trying to get inside NORAD before they completely seal it up, because it's a command center. They've got to seal it because they know it'll come under attack. They know it's a nuclear target. So it's buried inside of a mountain. But you still got to seal it up so that radiation and the blast and all that fun stuff doesn't get inside. So they show up as the door is shutting, and it's like a giant bank vault style door. And so, you know, are they going to make it? Are they not going to make it? If you actually look at the speed the door is shutting, they would have stood no chance. It's like when you see the ticking clock on a bomb, and it's like, well, by the speed that's going, that should have blown up 5 minutes ago, but the guy's still disarming it, and it's going to stop on 1 second. It's kind of one of those situations. So they get inside. Behringer's got the orders locked into the computer. That's important. He's got the president on the line, and oh yeah, so it comes to the point of the like, Behringer's like, so Mr. McKittrick, what does the Whopper recommend we do? And he's like, if the Whopper recommends a full retaliatory strike, and Behringer just throws papers down. He's like, I needed some damn computer to tell me that. I mean, because it's like, well, as you see very shortly, like, that's what it's always going to come to. You don't need a computer for that. So, yeah. So Falcon and David and Jennifer get there. It's Jennifer, right? Yeah. They'll get there, and Falcon's like, General Behringer, like, this is baloney. Like, this the computer's trying to trick you. It's trying to win the game. It's trying to trick you into destroying the Soviet Union, which will allow it to win the game, because it doesn't understand the difference between reality and the game. And so it's trying to prompt you to do what it can't do. It can't just independently launch the missiles yet. So he talks to Behringer, like, look, has the enemy made it abundantly clear that they could destroy you? He goes, yeah. He's like, have you made it abundantly clear what you will do in retaliation? Yeah. He goes, so does it make any sense at all for the enemy to randomly, with no provocation, fire so many nuclear missiles that you would have to retaliate in such a way that you will completely destroy the Soviet Union? He's like, does that make any sense to you? And you can see that he's getting through, and he's like, look, you're being lied to by a machine. Don't act like one. And so he calls the president and tells him, we can't confirm that the missiles are inbound. Like, we've got to wait. We've got to see what actually happens. And so they call up some of the bases that are going to be hit first, and they get people on the phone line. They tell them, like, well, we're currently showing, I think it's like 2,400 inbound nuclear warheads. And he's like, but we can't confirm it, so gonna need you guys to tell us if you get vaporized here in like 30 seconds. So after the computer registers all the hits and the people are still on the line, like, yeah, there's been no nuclear blast here, they realize that the computer's they realize what's happening. The computer's lying to them and they can't trust the computer. Well, the problem is they pushed in this little button that says lockout changes. And that's to prevent that's in case like the mountain gets hit and it locks in the orders. And so they can't unlock it. The computer won't let them change things because now the computer has control. And it's still trying to win the game. So it like deletes the password file so no one can log in or anything like that. And it's going through and trying to get the launch codes. It's running through all the number sequences, trying to find the code to launch the missiles itself. And I think this is the point where Behringer's like, well, Mr. McKittrick, after careful consideration, I've decided that your system sucks. And McKittrick's like, I have to take that from you, you pig-eyed sack of shit. McKittrick's like, I would have expected better from an educated man like you. So, yeah. Yeah, so then McKittrick's like, well, I guess I better get the president back on the line because I guess we might be doing this after all. So they realize there's a conversation that they had earlier with Falcon that he explains that there was one lesson he could never teach Joshua, and that was the concept of futility. That sometimes you can't win, and so there's no point. And his example is from tic-tac-toe, because he asks Jennifer, he's like, do you play tic-tac-toe before? He goes, yeah. He goes, do you still play it? No. Why not? Because you can't win. Always ends in a draw. And he's like, well, he could never make Joshua see that. And so Matthew Broderick has the bright idea of, let's bring up the games list. And so they see that global thermonuclear war is running, and they're like, oh, tell it to shut down the missiles. He's like, no, you don't understand. That's not going to work. And so they bring up the games list again, and they see that tic-tac-toe's not on there. And Falcon's like, well, it's got to be in there somewhere. And so they tell him to bring it up. And initially Matthew Broderick plays against the machine a few times, and he realizes this isn't going fast enough. It's not going to learn fast enough. He's like, can we make it just play against itself? And so then they set the number of players to 0, and it starts going. It starts cycling through faster and faster and faster, and it never can win. And so then the computer begins to extrapolate the meaning of what they're trying to tell it. And so then it brings up the different scenarios for the nuclear conflict. And it begins going through one scenario after another, and they never have a winner. And you get to see what I meant by my earlier comment, in that in all these scenarios, it doesn't matter how it starts, there hits a tipping point in all of them where the Soviets and the United States just launch everything and destroy the world. And that's the conclusion in every single one of the scenarios, because no matter how it starts, that's where it winds up. And that's nuclear theory in a nutshell, by the way. So the whole MAD scenario, mutually assured destruction. And so it starts cycling through faster and faster until finally, and it has the launch codes. It can fire them at any time, but it's learning. And finally it stops and just comes up the main screen. It's like, greetings, Professor Falcon. And it's like, strange game. It seems the only sensible move is not to play. And so that's the lesson they were trying to teach it. And so it stands down. And then just before this, General Behringer had asked, well, why don't we just unplug the damn thing? And McKittrick explains that we can't do that because it will interpret that as an attack on NORAD, and loss of communication, the silos would just fire their missiles at the last known target. That's why the lockout thing is important, because once you engage that, that's what the program is set to do. You do that once you're sure you're going, because NORAD is a target, and so in case it does get destroyed, the missiles will just fire, just in case they have just in case the idea is take out command and control so they can't fire. And then it's like, haha, joke's on you. We're going to fire anyway. Very similar to our posture with our submarines and their nuclear missiles, as I talked about it in the review for By Dawn's Early Light. So that's the movie. It ends with everyone cheering and congratulating each other for not destroying the world there in NORAD. So I'm given to understand that this movie is actually somewhat loosely based on something that actually happened. Supposedly, in real life, we had a computer system for this purpose, and the reason the one in the movie is called the Whopper is because the one in real life was called the Big Mac. Yeah. And supposedly someone loaded up a gaming simulation into it, and it started the ball rolling with us thinking the Soviets were ready to throw down for good and all for the ultimate battle of ultimate destiny, and they weren't, but we started going ahead, and the main thing that stopped it was the people on the Soviet side are like, I'm sure it's just a glitch, it happens, because they didn't think we were going to total commitment, because again, it's the same concept as in the movie. Unannounced, just go for it. Like, no, it doesn't make any damn sense. Also, interesting side note, after the end of the Cold War, the United States and Soviet Union, well, Russia at that point, kind of shared like some of our deep intel and some of the things in our archives and like our plans and everything. The Russian plans to invade Europe did not involve their nuclear weapons. Our plans to fight against that did involve our nuclear weapons. The Russians thought we were bluffing the entire time and had no idea that, no, we were willing to throw down and we were willing to go all the way. And pretty sure that scared the shit out of them, realizing that they'd been dealing with insane people who were willing to just destroy the world. So, sobering moment, I'm sure, for the Russians. And for us, or at least it should have been. So, the movie itself, though, I'm given to understand that's what happened. I wasn't there, so I couldn't tell you for sure. But the movie itself has a lot of, like, just weird, quirky humor moments spread throughout it. Kind of like Die Hard, actually. Because Die Hard, if you ever watch it, yeah, it's an action movie. Like, it's weird, like, quirky moments. Like whenever the SWAT guys are getting ready to go in, they're going through the bushes, and one guy's like, "Oh, ow," because he like scratches himself on a rose bush. This big tough guy, and then like the guy inside the Uber henchman who's in almost every '80s movie where you needed a henchman, the Chinese guy. I can't think of his name. It's like Al Leong or something. He's got a big Fu Manchu mustache and doesn't speak in hardly any of the movies he's in, but he's always a henchman. And he's sitting there like with his gun ready, and he like realizes that like the snack bar is right below him, and so he's like trying to keep like sliding it open, like pulling the candy bar out and starts to eat it. Just a bunch of weird little quirky things like that. So like in this movie, like General Behringer, whenever everything's going, he's got the president on the line. Some guy hands him some intel, and he's like, "Oh, you lying bastard," or something like that. And he's like, "Oh no, not you, Mr. President." Or whenever they first bring David, they're bringing him in. They're like, "Well, he fits the perfect profile of a Soviet agent." And there's one guy that's like, "What does this say about the state of our educational system?" And he's just going on bare, just like, "Oh, Jesus Christ," or whenever their parents are eating at one point, the dad bites into the corn on the cob and it's cold, it's raw, and he's like, "This is raw corn." And his mom's like, "Oh yeah, it's supposed to have nutrition. Can't you just taste the nutrition?" He's like, "The hell are you talking about?" Just a bunch of quirky, funny little things like that. Just spread all, or like whenever Matthew Broderick's character is they got him in like it's not a holding room, it's the only thing they've got, it's a locked room for like medical exams, and the guy that's supposed to be watching him instead is hitting on the nurse like very aggressively, and she's like, "Go away." It's just all kinds of just funny, quirky little things spread all throughout the movie that you're like, is this supposed to be a comedy? Maybe, like, this is a serious subject matter. Like the serious parts are serious. It's never used to deflate a serious situation, but it's odd. It gives some character to the movie that it wouldn't otherwise have. The music's okay. Nothing, no pun intended here, noteworthy. But it's, you know, serviceable. And yeah, I mean, the movie's perfectly acceptable for children, as long as they, you know, as long as you're ready to explain the whole thermonuclear war thing. Nothing, there's no like graphic violence or anything at all like that in the movie. I think there's very little swearing. Yeah, so it's perfectly acceptable for younger audience. And I talked about this movie, I believe I talked about this movie in another video I did about a year ago or so about AI villains. And in hindsight, I don't think I should label the Whopper a villain, because it's not really Joshua. Sorry, it's not really doing anything villainous. This is more like a machine trying to like figure things out. A machine that's been designed to learn, that doesn't have any ill will against humanity, just doesn't understand the difference between a game and a reality. So it's intelligent, but probably not like, I don't think it's self-aware, if that makes sense. It's smart enough to make decisions, but it's not smart enough to actually comprehend the decisions. This isn't Skynet. This isn't Skynet where Skynet actually became self-aware and it's like, yeah, screw humanity. Or this isn't like HAL in 2001, where it's a matter of HAL wasn't acting out of malice. It's just they gave him conflicting orders, and the solution to the conflicting orders was kill the people. Because HAL, if you watch 2010, if I remember correctly, HAL is actually afraid. HAL is definitely self-aware, because at the end, if I remember right, he's afraid because of what's going to happen. And I think he asks Dave if he's going to be with him. It's been also seen 2010. I don't remember if it's him or the professor they brought with him, but he asks one of them if he's going to be with him because he's going to be destroyed. He's going to be absorbed into the monolith or something like that. And he's afraid. You know, whereas with Skynet's different. Skynet's got some screws loose. But Joshua doesn't seem to have that kind of personality, that self-awareness. So I don't think you can properly classify Joshua as a villain. The antagonist, but not necessarily a villain. So at least that's my two cents on the matter. But yeah, that's about all I've got on that one. I think it's a pretty good movie. You know, 8.5. Like I said, there's some logical issues here and there. Like the way he escapes NORAD is way too easy, because if you're going to allow tours into NORAD, the uber secure, this is where we control the nukes facility, at the very minimum everyone's going to have a badge, and he didn't have one to get out. At also the bare minimum, they're going to know how many people came in, and as they're loading up on the bus, they're going to count them to make sure the same number's going out. When they notice there's a +1, where the hell did the +1 come from? Like, that bus isn't leaving. So he would never have been able to escape that way. And even if he did, that bus would have made it 5 miles down the road before they're like, hey, you know, guys, how do you escape out of here? Well, I mean, the tour bus just left. I'm like, oh, well, let's stop the tour bus, shall we? Like, so, but then we wouldn't have a movie. But I know that does kind of lend credence to it being a lighter weight movie, I suppose. But yeah, stuff to think about. So, like I said, it's probably, you know, 8.5. It's a pretty good movie, pretty entertaining. As far as I know, it all holds up. So, like I said, there's a few logical issues here and there, and the random lighthearted moments, like, they don't detract from the movie, but, you know, makes it charming, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so that's about all I got to say on that one. Let me know down in the comments what your thoughts on the movie are. Have you seen it before? I imagine a lot of you have, given the demographics that YouTube shows me my audience is made up of here, and given that the movie is from the early 80s. So, but let me know what you think. Did you like it? Dislike it? Do you think it's a crock? All these random nuclear trivia bits, interesting, not interesting, terrifying, you know, what have you. Let me know. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Sharing and commenting are the things that help us the most with growing the channel, and we always appreciate it. But yeah, that's going to be it for this one. So just remember, if the nukes start flying, your desk will somehow save you. At least that's what the government told you back in the 60s. Have fun.